What's up? What's happening? Welcome here to Lacrosse Now. Travis Eldridge with you once again. We're not going to waste any time this week. We're going to get right into the guests because we have three big ones to get to. We'll kick things off in the recruiting realm. Inside Lacrosse's Ty Zanders joining us. Inside Lacrosse releasing their Power 100 freshman rankings on the men's side this week. We'll talk about the impact classes, including a huge freshman class for Syracuse, the number one overall recruit, Joey Spallina, now a freshman there. We'll talk about him, a couple of other guys in that Syracuse class. We'll also talk about impact guys. What freshmen in this Power 100 could have the biggest impact right away on their particular teams? So Ty Zanders talks about that. We'll also be joined by Yale head coach Andy Shay. Talk a little fall ball with him. What the Ivy League maybe felt like they had to prove going into last year, if there were any conversations within the coaching staffs there amongst the Ivy League institutions heading into last year, what he felt about the competition last year in the Ivy League. Also talk a little bit about Matt Brandow, why maybe he's not getting the national recognition he probably should be, considering he was one of the top scorers in the entire country last year. He, of course, is back again this year for Yale. So we'll talk with Andy Shay. Then a new thing that we have going on Lax Sports Network, Watch Party, where we relive some of the great games that have been here on LSN, and we're joined by coaches and players throughout. So we're going to show you an interview from one of our watch parties. Towson, former Towson attackman Brendan Sunday joining us to think back on a memorable 2019 season for the Tigers. So that'll cap things off at the end of the show. But we'll kick things off. Ty Zanders from Inside Lacrosse talking some of the top recruits in the country entering their freshman years here in 2022-23. So as we just mentioned, Ty Zanders, Inside Lacrosse's recruiting and high school editor, joining us now. Ty, it's been a while since we've chatted, man. So good to have you on the show again.
Good to be back. Always a pleasure catching up.
You guys have the class of 2022 Power 100 that just came out here this week on InsideLacrosse.com. So we're going to dive into that. And in talking about this recruiting class, my Orange are a big talker here, and deservedly so. Not only do they have Joey Spallina, the number one overall guy, they got 5 guys in this top 20 in your freshman class. How pivotal is this recruiting class for Syracuse when you look ahead for the Orange?
Incredibly pivotal. I think this is a class that, I wouldn't say will be relied on, especially right now. I think the beauty of Syracuse this year is that they've kind of added some transfers around them so that there won't be too much responsibility put on these freshmen early on in terms of carrying the load, because you never want to rely on freshmen too much. But this class, in terms of where it can take Syracuse. They talk so much about wanting to bring Syracuse back. And I think this is a class that can do that on top of, the 23s and the 24s. There's no doubt that Syracuse invested a lot financially into this class. And I think that they will reap the rewards of that. I have Riley Figueres as my top defender. Joyce Spallina is my top attackman. And quite frankly, Finn Thompson could be looked at as the top midfielder, albeit an attack midfielder, kind of hybrid in positionless offense. But it's a class from I think especially in terms of those top 8, 9, 10 guys that I see a lot of these guys seeing the field this year. But just in terms of long term, I think, this is a class that can leave their mark on Syracuse. And I think maturity-wise and character-wise, they're built to handle that. I talked to Syracuse, last week at length, and they talk about how humble they are, and humble and hardworking, and not an ounce of ego. And I think that what we always have to remember is that, look, these rankings, you have to kind of forget them. You kind of have to, throw them out the door once you get to campus, the most part, and once you, suit up, because you can't let that, inflate your ego. You have to kind of, be totally into the team. I think this is a group that embodies that. There's no doubt.
Give me some context here, just in your recent memory, because we saw Duke, that class a couple years ago with Brendan O'Neill was absolutely loaded with guys in the top 10, top 20. Virginia's had some of them. Context-wise, where does this class for Syracuse rank among some of the really good ones we've seen here as of late?
Yeah, no, it's without a doubt one of the best classes I've seen in the last 5 to 10 years. I even look back to I guess it was 2007 with the Bratton brothers and Gittleman and Bray Malthus. I mean, in terms of having that many guys in the top 10, and Carolina, I think last year had 11 guys in the Power 100. And every year is different. Like we said, this is such a unique class because they won't overlap with the fifth years as much. So we're going about it pretty differently. But no, this is absolutely one of the better classes that I can remember. And for Syracuse, I think it's the best since Pat Parrott's group and that class. So it's definitely a special one.
How did it come together? Because I think Joey Spallina probably is a selling point for some. Like, is that the selling point that gets some guys to follow? Like, was it the coaching staff selling part of what the Orange could be now moving forward? Like, how did you kind of see this come together?
Yeah, I mean, quite frankly, I think given the staff dynamics and the changes, I always, I'm quick to credit Pat March. I think Pat March did a tremendous job recruiting this group. And, with his relationships, his ability to evaluate, I think Hughes did a really nice job emphasizing certain areas and, going back to Long Island and crushing it there, making sure some of the best players upstate weren't going to Cornell or Yale or whatever it is, and that they're staying home. And I think for Hughes, that was huge. And to be able to keep these guys on board, because we've seen so many high-ranked recruits go to Syracuse, or come to Syracuse rather, and then flip. I think we saw it a lot under the old coaching staff. So this is a class that was recruited, largely by Desko and Rogers, and definitely March. And then with Petramala coming in and Gary Gate, they got Finley Thompson, who's, number 5 player in the class. They flipped Riley Figueres, number 6 player in the class from Rutgers, which I think, it looks even better of a move than it did when it happened, because Riley has just taken his game another level. And then Jordan Beck was a guy that was added late. So it's a really interesting one because you had a lot of different coaches, fingerprints on this group.
So last one on Syracuse, and we'll move on elsewhere, I promise, because the Syracuse fan base in upstate New York is a passionate one, and they expect things right away. What are the reasonable expectations for seeing some of the impacts of this class? Like, is it some guys are going to contribute right away and give this team an opportunity to win some games maybe that people don't think they should this year? Or is this like maybe 2 years down the road we're going to see some of the benefits of this class?
I think we'll definitely see the benefits of this class right away. But I think as a whole for the Syracuse expectations, I think they have to be tempered a little bit. I think that's in terms of the quarterfinals or Final Four. My guess, I think it's going to take maybe 2 or 3 years, and stacking up those strong classes, those transfers. But a lot of these guys are going to play off, and play early and often. And Finn Thompson, I think, could be in the first midfield, could be the fourth attackman, because I do see Simmons, Hiltz, and Spallina being that first group. I know they're very high on Michael Leo and Luke Roa come out of the midfield, and Billy Dwan and Riley Figueres. Although I know that there's an injury for one of the freshmen that we're kind of waiting and seeing the verdict on today or tomorrow on one of these 5 stars that it's not Joey, but it's one that I think will is definitely unfortunate. But I think a lot of these guys will play early, and they add to the depth. I think that there wasn't as much depth on these past Syracuse rosters. And the talent level that they have right now, it's really impressive. And I think that maybe some of these guys won't be like huge game changers off the bat, but over time, I think that they really did a good job against all positions, between McCool and goal, who will probably wait his turn behind Will Mark, who I know has been playing fantastic. Vinny Trujillo, helping the D-middies and the depth on defense. So they really, checked a lot of boxes with this class.
You mentioned depth, and if you're going to compete in the ACC, you got to have the talent depth, because you look at these rankings, and 8 of the top 10 players in your class are ACC players here as freshmen. We saw the down of this past year with the ACC, with just Virginia making the NCAA tournament. That's not the expectation moving forward. What is it about this conference's ability to just reload and with talent, and like, a team like a Duke or a Notre Dame with their struggles last year? Is it because it's not a lack of talent? So how is it how these coaches are going to have to develop some of this talent over the time of these guys turning from freshmen to sophomores, juniors, seniors in order to make sure they get it done on the biggest stages?
Yeah, and honestly, that's one of those things that we have to look at. We have to look at kind of how these roster looks, and like I said, the fifth year aspect of it. But because we're not going to have as many of those transfers, so I think it kind of will probably allow more kids in these rankings to pan out, in these past rankings to pan out because of the opportunities they'll be given. And I think I look back to when they were being recruited, that is, this was in the fall of 2020 when coaches were figuring out really, okay, who on my roster am I going to have for a few more years because of the whole COVID thing, especially in the Ivy League. And that's why, you don't see as many Ivy League guys towards the top because they're kind of, they've got a lot of upperclassmen that have taken semesters off or whatever it is. And because of, Ivy not playing and all that. So, that's definitely a factor. But no, it's nothing crazy. It's really just, this is what the ACC does. And this is what Maryland does, as well, stacking up great classes. But, I think, like I said, you're not going to have as many reinforcements or 1 year rentals. And I think that's why I'm very bullish on these ACC recruits in particular and down the line.
We mentioned some of these Syracuse guys, and let's take them out of the equation here. Who else in your top, however many, to go as deep as you want, give me a couple of guys you feel like maybe because of position or because of the school they've gone to could be immediate impact guys right away here as freshmen?
Yeah, there's a lot. Certainly true at Sunderland, bumping him up to number 2 this year, which was a really tough decision. So many people have lumped together Spalina and Sunderland and Petra for quite some time and for good reason. And they're all outstanding. And you're splitting hairs up there. But I think, I can definitely see Sunderland having a strong year, and he's going to follow that kind of UVA, high-ranked recruit tradition of running out of the midfield and doing something he's never really done, just like Schellenberger did, Moore did, like Schutz did. The proof's in the pudding there, and I think that I know Truitt's been having a really impressive fall based on what I've heard, and I think he'll have a different role from what he had in high school, and so many of these guys do. But he's one that I think absolutely will. But it's always interesting to look at each one. Someone like Thomas Riccardelli, I'm as high on him in the number 4 spot as a goalie as anybody in that position these last 5-10 years, but. You got Liam Enneman in front of you. It's going to be hard to play. So yeah. It's, one of those dynamics there. But that's definitely, one of the guys that, I'm very high on. But there's a lot of names that I know will play.
One of the names that I had a chance to see back in the Juniors Open a couple of years ago was Johnny Cool. And on top of having maybe the coolest name there is in this recruiting class, he's going to Ohio State. I also really liked his game as a long stick midfielder, his ability to play some offense and push forward as well. What did you see from him?
Yeah, no, I'm a big fan of Johnny. I think the year that he had, just being a Baltimore guy myself and getting to see McDonough play a lot of times, many times in person. He took his game to another level and was a tremendous leader and a really impressive cover man, helping them win the NCAA championship. So I think he's a guy that I'm definitely a fan of. I think people may not see that, based on the ranking, but it's the thing with this class, it's loaded defensively. The depth defensively is really impressive. And I think, sure, it may take some of these guys time based on depth charts, but he's one I'm very high on, along with, someone like Cullen Brown, playing some defense for Ohio State, and Blake Island, a post grad from Western Reserve, and Adi Mady, and it's a good group with Ohio State and the Big Ten in general. And Johnny Cool is definitely a big part of that.
So just generally here, because between the rule change in terms of the contact period beginning September junior year, then backed up essentially felt like right away with the pandemic, things have been kind of out of whack in terms of recruiting. It feels like finally we're getting into like normal summers now in like the last year or so. Where is the recruiting landscape in terms of like how it feels between the rule change and the pandemic now as opposed to even like 5 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, it's drastically different. There's no doubt. And that was the same thing. Even if you put aside the whole COVID thing, which is out of everyone's control, it looks very different from the way it did 5-10 years ago. And that's for the best. I think this class for me, it was, I wouldn't say difficult to evaluate. It was difficult for anybody to evaluate. I mean, I was lucky enough to be out there on the sidelines, and coaches had to recruit these guys off of Zoom and off of film. So I think that is one of those things to watch with this class, is that, both sides were kind of taking chances on each other by committing, over Zoom and film and all that. So I'm intrigued to see kind of what the pain out rate is, and how these marriages, work out with these two sides. So, but big picture, I think even just moving on to the 24s, I mean, I feel like it's become very, very chaotic with this junior recruiting. And, many coaches I've talked to about their freshmen these last few weeks have said, look, I feel like it's been harder to get to know the freshmen because so much of your time is spent on recruiting and taking going to dinner and having the phone calls and texts and the visits, and they've altered their schedule based on that. So I think, with all that said, I'm very intrigued to kind of see how it shakes out. But no, recruiting has been, certainly chaotic. And this is a class that has some disadvantages out of their own control, as of the 21s and the 20s and all that. So I think, as you said, we're definitely getting back to closer to normal. And I could feel that this summer. There's no doubt.
Yeah, that's a great point about spending time bringing kids in. You're like, I've got these kids on campus, but I've got to focus on the next juniors who are going to be here in a couple of years. And you got fall ball in the middle of that with September and October. I will be interested to see if coaches start changing their calendar around what they've got to do recruiting wise.
Yeah, and it's definitely, it started to happen. I mean, I would say a good amount of coaches I talked to last week, definitely said that they've kind of moved things back, or and some of you brought up, look, we're a sport that changes rules so often, but I think that there's, several coaches that have been in the Final Four these last few years said to me that I think that maybe another change is needed. I don't know what it is, a contact period. I don't know how the summer, will look. I don't know if we push it back another year, but I think that at some point, I do think that a change should and could be made. And that it would benefit the sport and benefit the current teams and all parties involved, really. So, while things are getting more normal, I think that maybe this could spawn some change. Although, I think everyone would agree that this 9/1 contact date has been just huge for the betterment of the sport, and everyone.
Yeah, for sure. Lacrosse rule changes? No way. We don't do that in the college game ever. No. One more on kind of the philosophy thing here, because we've seen, obviously, the fifth year and the grad transfer situation has been unique because of COVID, but the transfer portal and that situation isn't going away even after these players are going to be able to use that fifth year. How has that, and you can include the grad transfer stuff in here early on too, how has that changed how some of these coaches have gone after some of these classes in the last couple of years, knowing there's also the possibility you could get some All-American for some of these big programs coming from another school to bring into your team for a year?
Yeah, it's definitely happened. I look at school like Maryland, and there's no one that manages a roster better than John Tillman. And, I look at the fact that, 3 of the freshmen that they now have, they all PG'd. And I think instead of maybe redshirting when they got to campus, and Maryland has 6 commits in the 23 class. And I think that, and that's a good example of just kind of how you're managing everything and recruiting, and having to look ahead even more based off, your philosophy or how your roster looks. I think we'll see Maryland not have as many chances going forward once things go back to normal. Because look, at a certain point, you have to trust the guys in your roster and the development of them, and they do that, very well. And a lot of these schools, do that very well, and that's a huge part of this. Obviously, it's not just getting the talent; it's developing that talent and scheming to maximize that talent. And I think that, it certainly changes the way that you recruit, because, you have to. And, I think that it's been fascinating to have these conversations with certain coaches and say, oh, look, I'm now keeping a spot open or taking one less guy because of the transfer portal. And you really have to, because that can be, and of course, football is very, very different with the way that it's built. But I mean, I'm looking at the way that football affects, or the transfer portal affects football, and it's huge. And, so I think it's been fascinating to kind of, think about that. And like I said earlier in this conversation, to look at this class and to look at the composition of each class, and think about, what could happen. And I think in the past, you kind of could say, all right, well, Maryland and Rutgers and Georgetown and so will take some transfers inevitably. And we couldn't really do that as much with this group. So it definitely changed things.
Yeah, for sure. And it feels like moving forward, it's going to be more of like the Virginia philosophy we've seen, where it's maybe one impact guy that joins a program, as opposed to what we've seen from Georgetown and Rutgers here the last couple of years, where it's like, all right, we're going to bring in like 5 or 6 guys that are going to drastically change this team for a year. It feels like with the 5th year, COVID year going away, that'll be more of the thing moving forward.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I think that, Rutgers is a good example in the sense that I feel this is probably the best class that they've had. That I can remember from top to bottom. I mean, a lot of 4 stars and, some big gets. There were some surprises, but meanwhile, they took, a good amount of transfers. So I think I'm very interested to kind of see how those guys develop and get on the field this year, and going forward, as it goes away. But even when it goes away, we'll still keep having transfers because, especially this 22 class, I can definitely envision it because, yeah, they recruited over Zoom, and or coaching changes or whatever it is, just things change in general. And sometimes the grass is greener, and kids will keep transferring. That's not going to change. That's just the way it's going to be.
Well, always an exciting time when you see your Power 100 list. It gets you really feeling about, like, you're really thinking about the spring now. Like, we've got freshmen we could talk about that we think might be an impact guys. It's going to be exciting. Ty, we appreciate the time. And, man, I'm sorry about your football teams this past weekend. It was tough.
We don't. It's lacrosse season, man. We don't talk about that right now. But life goes on. But just excited to be back in the lacrosse field again and doing all that, and fun to evaluate this group and great talking to you guys. So appreciate you having me, and hopefully see you guys soon. Yeah, for sure. You can check out Ty's Power 100 list up on InsideLacrosse.com right now. Ty, appreciate the time, man. Thanks. Thank you. Appreciate it.
This segment of Lacrosse Now is brought to you by Watch Dingo.
So to catch up a little bit about fall ball, we got Yale head coach Andy Shay joining us now. Coach, I know you guys are kind of winding down here in the fall. Where do you feel like you guys are at?
It's a great question. I have no idea. I think we'll know a little bit more this weekend. We're going to play Marquette and UMass Lowell. We played our alums 2 weeks ago, and that was a good run, good group of players on a Friday night. So we got them in a pretty good condition, I think. And but they're not organized like these kind of teams that we're going to play. And, I think that we'll know a lot more after Sunday.
For just about everybody, the fall has kind of evolved here, especially throughout the pandemic. But for you guys especially, like, how different is this fall compared to what you were able to do last year?
It feels a lot different just because I think we were a young team last year and didn't really realize that it was that bad until the fall started and how many young guys we had. Now we've got a group of sophomores that are doing a great job of leading, and I think our new freshmen are kind of feeling the brunt of that because those guys, they're excited to lead a little bit right now.
When you talk about the fall philosophy, I think the pandemic affected some of this, but coaches have kind of changed their philosophy throughout the last several years. It feels like, especially in terms of like how many events they want to play in the fall. Do you want to have more scrimmages maybe in the spring instead of the fall? How much do you travel? How much do you do? Like, how has your philosophy, if it has at all, changed over the course of your years, especially at Yale?
It hasn't changed much. I mean, we've got, we're limited as to what we can do in the fall. We can only get together for 12 days. So, as far as travel is concerned, we can't necessarily go overnight unless it's for an event. So you have to ask special permission for that. For us, it's just getting the best team that we possibly can. and and our best teams, I should say, that we possibly can, and getting a look about who we are. And we keep it simple. We try and get the young guys up to speed with the pace we want to play, and then kind of go from there. So we'll reassess after this weekend and see if we're a little further ahead or a little further behind.
You mentioned events, and we're talking here on Friday. People listen to this after the weekend, but the USA Lacrosse Fall Classic is coming up, and Maryland, as the defending champ, has that opportunity to go play in that event. It's something you guys have done as the defending national champs. How unique is that situation as a coach where obviously you're trying to evaluate? It's also a cool opportunity, but it's different maybe than any other fall event you would play in.
It's very different. And, the funny thing about that was, the year after we won it was the year they put in the shot clock. And we had, I wanted to be able to practice the shot clock, and Skip Lickfist was like, well, we're playing international and that's just the way it goes. We only had 4 practices going down there, and we had to learn international rules. And that was a pretty intense game, to be honest with you. And it was a lot against us that day. And I think it's for USA Lacrosse more than it is for the national champion. And that's fine. That's the way that is. But it was a huge challenge. And it was one that we were kind of like, okay, going in, you're like, this is great. We get to do this. And, once you're in it, you're like, okay, this might not be necessarily to our benefit, but it worked out just fine.
Yeah, I feel like maybe the most you're going to learn about your team is just where they are at, competitive wise. It's like you're going to compete because it's a big stage, but otherwise, some of the rules and things, they're unique. No
doubt about it. And, you're not going to see that many great players and athletes at once. So it's probably it's definitely a high watermark of talent that you're going to see.
So let's talk about your team. You mentioned the youth from last year. What did you learn throughout last season about some of the young guys that you have on this roster that are coming back?
I think that we threw a bunch of guys to the fire, and got them out there in different positions that in varying degrees of success. We had to, limp through some situations where guys didn't have experience, and we threw them out there, and a lot of those young guys really responded. And it's not just youth, kids that were new, freshmen. It was kids that, had been in college and hadn't played, a college game yet. So, and that's not just on us by any means. That's a little more on the Ivy League teams than the other schools, because they took that year off. But it was definitely an interesting perspective going into a game and saying, I hope this kid can, do it. And I think our guys survived through the year, and hopefully we reap the rewards of that.
You mentioned the Ivy League, and this past, or I guess the last offseason, there was talk about the Ivy League's demise because you guys took a year off and you didn't compete, and then a whole year happened without you. And then the Ivy League comes back and does what you guys did all year, and you have the amount of teams representing as you did in the NCAA tournament, which is unbelievable. Yeah. What collectively did you feel around the league about the year that was missed, and then what you guys almost felt like you needed to prove a year ago?
It's funny. I don't know if we even talked about it with each other as coaches. And I think, we text, we've got a Ivy coaches text string that with it, we refer to some things in the beginning of the year, before the year, stuff like that, legislation stuff we got to worry about. And then we'll talk to individual coaches one-off here and there. But I think we're just kind of proud of each other that everyone was doing really well out of conference, and that's obviously a double-edged sword, because now you got to play those guys, the next week or whatever. But I think we all took a fair amount of pride in how all of these kids reacted in their time off, and however you want to explain it. I don't know if there was naysayers that got, had egg on their face when this was over, but it's clear to me at least that all these kids really took the time off seriously and played and worked, really hard and were ready to play once the season rolled around.
Yeah, I think that was the thing that jumped out to me too. Is I was talking to guys at Princeton, and they all went out to Park City, Utah, and they're training and playing and going to class because they can do it remotely, but they stayed together and they worked. And there were so many guys that felt especially on your team, that were young names that people didn't really know, but they had a whole year or so away where there was training and it like happened. It was almost like a professional environment where you can't get together, but these guys worked their butts off in order to be ready for last year.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's clear. I think all of us have those stories of, I think we had a couple of guys that were out there in Utah as well. We had some guys in Florida, and their time, away from school, they spent with each other, and I think that was their bridge to this year.
So you've had some great attackmen, whether it's Ben Reeves, Jackson Morrill, Matt Brandow has obviously been the latest. Like, how do you compare what each one of them have brought that is similar or unique to your offense?
Well, I mean, Matt is the this year's version of the alpha, and he was last year as well. He's a little different than any of the ones that we've had in the past. But he's a little bit like Ben in a lot of ways, a little bit like Jackson in a lot of ways, and a little bit like Matt Gaudette. He's as good a finisher as we have as well. So, he's a chameleon. He can do a lot of the things that we need him to do. And the really interesting part about Matt is he really doesn't understand all that yet. So hopefully we can, beat that into his head this year and convince him that he is, he can do whatever we ask him to do. And, I think his ceiling is way higher than what he's shown, and he's been extremely impressive to date.
Yeah, I mean, the numbers show you that, like, he's one of the best guys out there. He's kind of quiet and a little bit soft-spoken when you talk to him, like, off the field. What is it nationally? Because I feel like he hasn't gotten the recognition maybe that he probably deserves, being probably one of the best players in the country.
Well, and, I was on the Towson committee, and I just said, listen, I think that here's a kid who led the country in points per game. And, he was doing it with one or two upperclassmen and a cast of freshmen. So, he doesn't do it selfishly either. So he had a phenomenal year. I think he should have been a Towson finalist, but he wasn't. And to his credit, he doesn't care. So, I do think that the guys on that committee, once they heard that from, they're kind of like, okay, maybe we need to promote him a little bit more internally. I don't know. But, he had 99 points. And like I said, he was flanked by a lot of younger players and, still came through. He played with a torn rotator cuff for the entire year, which is absurd.
Yeah.
We think maybe he had a bout with COVID at the end of the year. So we'll see.
No, I mean, if he puts up the numbers he did, like he has the last couple of times out, he should be in that conversation again. He's been unbelievable. The defensive end and in the midfield, obviously you lose Brian Teflon and Chris Fake, who've transferred out. Where's the transition of, like, you've had a guy in Chris Fake back there, it feels like forever, because of him stepping onto the field and playing right away for you in that national championship year. Where's the transition like in terms of the leadership in the midfield and the defensive end?
Well, I mean, you got a guy like Bryce DeMuth, who's been a 4-year player for us as well. He's taken the semester off, so he's our captain, and it's been difficult because, he's not allowed to be involved in practice or anything like that. Mikey Alexander, who played on the world team, is nursing an ankle right now, so he's been in and out of the, practice. So we've had a lot more use of guys that haven't been back there yet. So, and it's been interesting to see, who has developed. Jake Cohen has been down low for us this fall. But I think the entire construct of it's going to look very different once the spring rolls around, when Bryce comes back, and Mikey, who's, probably 80-90% right now, is fully 100%. So I think for us, with the attackmen we have in practice, we're getting a lot of baptism by fire for a lot of guys going against those guys. Yeah. Xander Martin's been a he's a junior on our team right now. He's done a great job down there, and we have some younger guys that are doing a good job as well.
Yeah, work in progress, and that's kind of where I think everybody is at this point in the fall.
That's where we are every day here.
Yeah, for sure. Speaking of work in progress, sixes is certainly a work in progress here in lacrosse, especially how everybody tries to play it. You had the unique opportunity to coach it here in the World Games and the biggest stage we've seen for sixes so far. What did you learn from that experience with USA Lacrosse this summer?
I mean, a both Bobby Benson and I think took a lot of we learned a lot over the course of the summer, I would say, actually the course of the year. But I think that we're still learning. We would finish games or practices or whatever and say, we talk about certain things that we notice, things we want to coach a certain way. I wish we had more time with those guys, and to really put more time into it. I wish we had more time, learning it so that we could have exposed those guys to the things that we learned that we didn't have to learn on the fly. So, Skip put it really well, saying we're trying to fly the airplane we're building, or something to that effect, or building it as we fly it, which is that, is the truth. And I think that we without having as strong a box culture as some of our, opponents to the north, I guess, it makes it a little more difficult, but that's not something that, I think that we're going to know that the next time around, hopefully, if it ever makes it to the Olympics.
Yeah, I mean, I've watched it now, and I did a women's tournament this past weekend, and for me, it was the first time I'd done play-by-play with it, and it feels like, especially when you have the athletes at the high level, it almost feels like it's like an NBA basketball game where, like, the stops become more valued than the goals at times, depending on how the runs are going, because the athletes are so great that if they're shooting well, like, it's tough to stop.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. There's no doubt about it. And the games are over in a blink. You're really not, we had a discussion about the coaches on the sideline, how many we could have down there. And to be honest, we could have sat in the stands. It happened. It's crazy how fast that game is. It's very player centric in that respect.
Yeah, I mean, adjustments on the fly are almost impossible because of the lack of time there is to communicate anything. Would like your feel, because obviously Canada used a lot of box. Like, from what we've seen so far, does it feel like it's box strategy that's going to work, or could you foresee other parts of the field game coming into play?
Yeah, I think that's the constant debate, is how much of it is field and how much of it is box. And I don't think it's entirely one, but it's definitely more box than field. And I think that, that Canada team was phenomenal, and had John Grant Jr., who I know well, they had a plan for who they wanted to take. And I think they took a lot of flack for leaving some guys home, but that's one of the best teams I've ever seen. They played that version of it the right way. They nailed it. So, I think that for us, I think we kind of want to take a look at what they did and probably build from there.
Yeah, it very impressive. And also, like, you look at the two-way guys they have, whether it's a Zach Currier or a Reed Bowering from what he did indoors. Like, those guys, they don't just grow on trees. Like, there aren't a lot of them around. So if you don't have them available to pick, it's tough to handle. Yeah,
those guys are built for it, and that's fine too. I think that, but now, like, looking at it, I think that like I said, we have a plan for how we can maybe coach it a little bit differently and give those guys a little better of a leg up.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Coach, we appreciate you taking some time here. Good luck. I know you got your final lacrosse fall event this weekend, so good luck out there, and we'll catch up sometime here closer to the spring.
Awesome. Thank you.
We have a new show here on LSN. I guess it's more of a day that we're celebrating each Wednesday on Lax Sports Network. It's called Watch Party, where we go back and relive some of the best games we've aired here on LSN with some of the players and coaches that took part in them. And so each week we've done this so far, and it's been a different school. We've looked back at a handful of their games from the last several years. One of the first ones we did was Towson, and with the Tigers, we had a chance to look back at a memorable 2019 season where they won a CAA championship, and we had a chance to relive some of those games with Brendan Sunday. So we're going to play you here on the show part of the interview I did with Brendan, thinking back at a really memorable 2019 season for the Tigers. What a game that was for Towson. We just saw the Tigers taking down Hopkins to kick off that 2019 season. One of the stars of that game, Brendan Sunday, joins us now here on our Towson Watch Party. Brendan, that was a good one for you, man. What was it, 6 goals, 2 assists to kick off the year?
Yeah, I think so. If memory serves correct. I mean, it's only been a 3 short years, but it was an awesome game, awesome atmosphere to kick off that season.
What was it that clicked in that game and that year for you? Because you went from 17 goals in 2018 to jumping to nearly 50 in 2019. What was it about that 2019 season for you?
Yeah, I think it was just clarity within the offense. For I think the offense as a whole, but specifically me. The year prior, I was bouncing back and forth between playing midfield and attack. We had some different lineup changes throughout the year, and going into that 2019 season, it was a pretty much clear cut. Hey, you're starting at attack. Throughout fall, the offense was kind of running through me. So I think it was just that being able to be in that specific position and just finding some success. We had some great guys in the offense with me, and we had a pretty big advantage at the face-off X every game. So a lot of possessions and a lot of opportunity.
Yeah, Alex Woodall being on your side is always a good thing.
It's always a good thing. Yep, he's one of the best.
We've talked to Coach Nadelin and Kobe Smith already about that Hopkins rivalry, because there's something special about Towson and Hopkins when you guys get together. What is it for you that kind of defines playing Hopkins when you got that black and gold jersey on?
Yeah, there's just some extra juice to it every time we play them. They're our crosstown rivals. They're 10 minutes down the road, and there's just a history to it. Towson's had its up and downs, but when we were there, and we were really competitive with them, and I think we were basically splitting. Whoever was the home team was winning. And I think there's something to be said for that. So it's just easy to get up for a game like that. Start of the season, week one, you're already jittery, ready to go, and having to beat your crosstown rival just makes it that much sweeter and that much more pumped up. If
memory serves me correct, was that the first game you guys wore the porthole throwback uniforms?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So that was it was actually rolled out. So I was out there doing some extra shooting or whatever after one of the practices, and I saw Zach Goodrich. He was doing a little photo op, and I got a little sneak peek of that, and I think that kind of also juiced the guys up a little bit too. It's something about those jerseys. We played pretty well on them. So.
Yeah, I mean, that was honestly, as good as you guys played during the year, the jerseys became as much of the story on social media and stuff as you guys did in terms of wins. What was the feeling like when did you guys first see those jerseys? Was it the day before or the week before? When did you guys first see them?
Yeah, so that was the week of that game, and I actually think they ended up. Hopkins had it planned for later in their season too, and I think they bumped theirs up too to do a complete throwback game. So no, it's awesome. I mean, I think you could even see it now. I think a lot of club programs, a lot of other programs at the collegiate level are also doing the porthole mesh, and I think the PLL just did a little throwback too this year. So it's definitely gained some ground. So.
Towson trendsetters. That's really what it's all about. The 2019 team, and you're right about the Hopkins thing, because I had gotten a tip from somebody saying that hey, we were going to do these special jerseys, and they had the matching helmets that had the alternating thing going on, and that Hopkins no, we found out Towson's going to do them. Now we need to do them.
Always following in our footsteps.
Overall, that 2019 season was a big one. Already as part of this watch party, we showed people the win over number 1 Loyola. Take me back to that night, that Wednesday night when you guys took down the Greyhounds.
Yeah, just another, crosstown rival. Them being number 1, just added more fuel to our fire, because we obviously felt like we were the best team in the country at that time. And, the midweek game too, all eyes on us. I don't think there was many games played that night. You guys covering it, it was a pretty electric atmosphere. I remember there was a few thousand people in the stands. Going up against Pat Spencer and those guys, it's never easy. And Coach Toomey's an unbelievable coach. So you always know you're going to get their best. In a similar situation, right? We've been more competitive, over the past few years with clubs like that, and it was a great way just to put us on display, on a national scale, and get a huge win for the program.
So that year was so big for you guys. You have the win over Hopkins, which kind of cemented you guys as being a team hey, we're to be reckoned with. You followed it up by beating Loyola. You ended up being the number 1 team in the country for a short time. You guys end up winning the CAA title. You host a playoff game. 5-10 years down the road, if you're talking to somebody about that season, what are the stories that stand out to you that you feel like you're going to be telling down the road about that year?
Yeah, I think we kind of hit on both of them. I definitely think, the Hawkins Loyola one will definitely be, a sweet story. But, the thing for me is just being with that group of guys. It was a special group of guys. We had some, tough time the year prior, to put it lightly. And I think the way that we just rebounded and the way that we kind of stuck together as a group, that team was like far and away, the most, connected group I've ever been a part of. And, I think just, little stories within that of just like, traveling on the bus, things of that nature, just eating meals together, just, silly things like that don't seem like a big thing to, maybe someone on the outside, but mean a lot to, all the guys in the team. So I think it's just the little things like that I'll always remember.
All right, so give me your favorite game. Doesn't even have to be from that year. Favorite game of your college career at Towson?
Oh, jeez. I think I got to go 2017 quarterfinal against Syracuse at Delaware. That was a different. It kind of put us back on the map. First of all, going back to the Final Four since the first one since 2001. I think it really just put us back on the map, and that was probably the best atmosphere I've ever been a part of. We were the early game, so we ended up catching some Albany, Maryland fans coming in at the end, and obviously at the time everyone thought it was a big upset, not us, but that was an awesome game to be a part of.
Yeah, and I have to think that too probably had to help like you and some of the guys that had been a part of that team in 2019, because like you guys had been there, like all the stuff, the national recognition, whatever, like not phasing you because you had been on the biggest stage of lacrosse in the Final Four a couple of years before.
Right, exactly. We kind of just started blocking out the noise. I mean, we try not to listen to that stuff pre-game anyway. I mean, it's always hard to, block stuff out, but we did our best to kind of do that. So, yeah, we were no strangers, to big games. The year prior to that, we beat Denver, who was coming off the national championship. That was my freshman year in 2016. So, definitely no stranger to the big stage.
Well, speaking of 2017, you planned this perfectly because we're going to send people to the 2017 game that you guys took down Hopkins there at Johnny Unitas. Brendan, we really appreciate you being part of our watch party. Thanks for taking a little trip down memory lane. We appreciate the time.
No, I appreciate you guys having me.
That's a little clip of what you'll get if you watch Watch Party every week here on Lax Sports Network. Wednesdays, they debut at 8 a.m. It's an all-day thing, so you can either start at 8 a.m. and watch throughout the morning and the early afternoon, or the block then restarts at 6 p.m. Eastern time. So 8 a.m., 6 p.m. Eastern, basically all day Watch Party Wednesdays on LSN. This week, we've got Delaware debuting. We've got some terrific guests in that one. Charlie Kitchen, Mike Robinson, former goalie Matt DeLuca, and of course, head coach Ben DeLuca joining us for our Delaware Watch Party this week. So make sure you check that out throughout the day here on Wednesday on LSN, and just keep coming back every Wednesday to see what new guests and what great games we're replaying. But that's all the time we have for this week's Lacrosse Now. Next week, I should be unveiling my preseason top 10 on the men's side, top 10 teams I'm thinking about here in the fall as we look ahead to 2023. So we'll run down those. I'll also have some more great guests as well. But that's all the time we have for this week. We'll see you next week.